this is Brian from ActiveMelody.com. Well, in this week's guitar lesson, I wanted to pay tribute to one of my heroes and one of the best guitar players ever, and that's George Harrison. And I think George is somewhat of an underrated guitar player when it comes to the whole virtuoso guitar master world. And I think that's because he makes it so effortless. What he does, whether it's analyzing the way that he writes the part for the song or just what he's playing, he makes it sound like it's really meant to be in the song, and he was a genius at that. But it's actually very difficult to do if you try and improvise in that style, or even try and write, or even try and play some of that stuff. It can be more challenging than you think. So what I'm going to do in this lesson is I'm going to focus on his slide technique, and so we're going to be using standard tuning too, which is fairly unique. Usually in slide you have to retune your guitar to an open chord, and you don't have to do that. So all you need to do is grab a guitar. This will work on an acoustic or electric guitar, and you'll be able to play along with this. So I wrote this part. It was just a little chord arrangement that sounded like something George would do, maybe like later in his career. And I tried to channel my inner George to come up with a slide part that would be complementary to something he would do. It's not exact, but it's my version of a George-style solo. Played on slide. Standard tuning. So I've got this lesson split into two parts. In this video we're going to take a look at the first half. However, if you'd like to watch the second half, as well as download the MP3 jam track so that you can practice the slide part, as well as download the tablature, you'll get all of that at ActiveMelody.com. Just look for EP163. That's a lesson number for this lesson. So let's go ahead and get started with George Harrison, Part 1. Alright, so I should have mentioned in the intro, if you don't have a slide but you want to follow along, you can follow along with this. You can just fret the notes instead. Since I'm in standard tuning, you'll be able to do that. And at least you'll learn the boundaries that we're working within, the scales, and you'll be able to understand them and follow along. And even play along. Alright, so let's talk through tone. I'll be very quick. This is the Gretsch Electromatic. I have the neck pickup on this for this song. And if you've got an electric, if you're using electric, switch to a neck pickup and then turn your tone down. It gives you more of a mellow sound. You don't want a real bright sound when you're playing slide, or at least that's what I look for in tone. I'm not using any pedals. I'm running out of the guitar into a Fender Blues Junior, a little 15-watt amp, and then out of that amp into the guitar. I have the reverb on the amp. Probably it looks like about 3 or 4. So pretty basic setup. Don't let your equipment be an excuse for not playing. You don't need anything special. You just need a guitar. You don't even need a pick for this. So we're going to be doing this finger style. We're going to be using primarily our thumb and our index finger for everything. So the first thing that I want to do, let's talk through chord structure. Actually, let me take this off. The chords are, it's A is the first chord. It's your 1 chord. The next chord is a C sharp minor chord, and that would be the 3 chord. And then we go to an F sharp minor, which would be the 6th chord. So you have a 1, 3, 6. And then the next chord is a B7. Now that's where it kind of twists, because what you normally have, the B7 is the 2 chord. In the scale for A, so it's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's where you get these numbers. So this would normally be a minor chord, but by making it major, and putting that 7 in there, it gives it a nice twist, and it's kind of unexpected, yet it's welcomed. It's not like a weird twist where you've gone into some weird zone, but it's kind of a fun way to twist it up. So kind of play around with that if you're writing music. Take what should be a major or a minor and make it a major. Sometimes that can really be a fun way to twist things up. So that's what I did there. I just made the 2 chord a major chord, or 7, dominant 7. Okay, so we have the A, the C sharp minor, the F sharp, the F sharp minor, the B7, and then it goes to the E, which is the 5 chord. And then I did an E7, so I extended it out another measure. Then we went back to the 1 chord, and then back to the 5. And that's it. That's the chord structure. Pretty basic. Something that you would hear George do, especially making that 2 chord a major chord. He would do stuff like that. He would also use a lot of diminished chords, which I was going to work in. I actually just sort of forgot about that as I was coming up with it. So this composition has 2 cycles through. So the first time through, we're going to be switching scales to match the chords. And I'm going to be explaining all of that in this video, how that works, and calling that out as it happens. But in the next video, in the part 2 video, I'm just going to stay in one scale, even though the chords change, same chords. I'm going to show you how you can just stay in one scale without having to switch scales to match the chords. So I wanted to give you a little variety in this lesson and show you both ways that it's done. So the first chord is the A. So what I think about is A major pentatonic. Well, let's get there first. So when I play an A major bar chord, this is how I think of home bass, and I've mentioned this in previous lessons, but I first find the root fret. And so wherever you make your major bar chord, wherever you're barring, that's your root fret. What's cool about that is anything on this side, think of it as a fence, anything on this side of the fence is going to be minor pentatonic, bluesy. See how it fits over that chord? Anything on this side of the fence is going to be major pentatonic or happy sounding. So you can take that same pattern, play it on this side of the fence where your pinky is touching it here, and then you got happy. Play it on this side of the fence, you got sad or bluesy. Very simple way of looking at it, but that's kind of how pattern 1 works when you're playing lead. So I'm going to be in happy zone, major. Even though it's got kind of a melancholy, a little bit of a sad feel to it, it's still considered major. So the first chord is an A chord. And so one other little tip or trick that you can take away is when you're using this chord shape, whether you be making an A chord like this or one up here, or however you're doing it, just remember that everything on this side, like between where you're barring and then right here, so skip a fret and go up a fret, this would be your pattern 1. You can see how that I'm putting all those notes down here on the 2nd fret. That's because those are the notes in the A chord. So maybe that made a light bulb go off for some of you. If you're playing a D, for example, same thing. Here's where that little bar is. So now you've got all this happy stuff right around that chord shape. Always tie your scales to a chord shape. Always anchor them to that. If you can get that concept, you can become an excellent guitar player, improviser. That's really the trick to the whole thing, is just always tying it back to a chord. All right, so we got the A chord. So the first thing that I played, now we're getting into the specific notes. I know there's a little bit of background, but they're important. Okay, so 2nd fret, 4th string, 2nd fret, 3rd string, 4th fret, 3rd string. Those are your first 3 notes. We'll get out the slide in just a second. I just want to show you where we're at from a scale perspective. And this is why it's nice to play slide in standard tuning, because you don't have to relearn scales. They're all the ones you know. Now we're going to go up to pattern 2. So when I slid up to pattern 2 here, that's the 4th fret. I'm sorry, it's the 6th fret, 3rd string. And then the 5th fret, 2nd string. These, by the way, are my fret markers. These look like thumbprints. Kind of hard to see, but hopefully I can angle it in a way that there's not enough glare on it, not much glare on it. All right, so all that's around the A chord, and you get why. Pattern 1, pattern 2, major pentatonic scale for the key of A. Now let's do it. Now let's put our slides on. Now let's try doing that with slide. Now, as I mentioned, we're not using a pick, so we're going to be doing finger style. So our thumb and our index finger. So our thumb goes down on the 4th string here, and our index finger on the 3rd string. Now, when you're putting the slide down, first of all, you're not pushing it down. You don't want to hear this. If you're hearing that, you're pushing too hard. That's the trick to slide, is getting it lightly touching the strings, very, very lightly. And so just play around with it. Anchor your thumb behind the neck like this. You have to have some touch point. You can't just be free floating like this. I mean, you can, but it's going to make it a lot more difficult. So I've found that if I anchor my thumb back here, I can do the vibrato, and I can more easily play lightly. That becomes easier with some kind of touch point. The last point I'll make on slide is you put the slide directly over the fret. You're not, when you're fretting, you're always like just behind the fret, and you get that leverage when you're playing slide, you're exactly over the middle of the fret. And when you play vibrato, you're going back and forth kind of between here and here, centering around that fret. So just kind of think of it that way. All right, now back to the notes. So here's the notes. We've already covered the fretting. Notice notice with my right hand how I muted the string right there. Now I muted it again. And then I slid up to the 6th fret 4th string. So let's try that. Now from here, we're going to jump from this note to here. 5th fret 2nd string. So notice how this is why you're using your fingers on your right hand. If you're using your pick, it would be a lot harder to do this. But I muted it with my index finger. Then I put my slide in place here over the 5th fret 2nd string. It's right there. It's not a big jump. And then I plucked it again with my index finger. So little bit challenging when you're new to slide, because you're going to get that weird kind of fretted thing, and you're dealing with all kinds of new things. But it comes. You can do this within an hour or two of just kind of messing with it, you know. Okay, so once we come to the 5th fret 2nd string, then we're going to play. Now, right here, the chord, so we've got the A chord, which we just covered. Now we got this C sharp minor chord. Well, let's think about C sharp minor. So if we were playing the C chord using that E chord shape, we'd be playing it up here. Our bar would be on the 9th fret. And what I did was, I know once I get up to this position, I know the minor pentatonic scale. It's just that pattern 1. It'd be up here. So I picked kind of 3 notes out of that, and it was, look at that. And that's what I played. Now, I did not make it methodical like that. I didn't literally come up here and do that. I'm just doing that to illustrate a point. But the point is that these notes are right out of that minor pentatonic scale for a C sharp minor. You can kind of slide until you get close to something, and then you can fudge it until you lock it into something. I know that may sound kind of weird, but if you're improvising with slide, you'll actually find it's a little bit easier. Now, it's going to be really muddy in the beginning. You're going to sound flat or sharp because you're kind of messing around. But when you're composing, as I wrote this little part, I found it was actually pretty easy to come up with that. I don't know if I would have came up with it. I would have probably done something different if I were playing fretted notes. Because I slid around until I found something that sounded right. And then I came back and went, oh yeah, it's part of the C sharp minor pentatonic scale. So I get why it works. All right. All right, so from here, we're going to do all this on the 2nd string, starting on the 5th fret. We're going to slide up to the 7th fret, 9th fret, and then back to the 5th fret. So we're going to pluck those 2, pluck, pluck, and then not pluck anymore. Slide up, slide down. You can see I was a little flat there. And that'll be the challenge, is trying to get those notes as accurate as you can, sliding into them and then sliding and then stopping on them. Okay, and then then I went to the 7th fret 2nd string and I put some vibrato on that. Now, what I did here is I went to F sharp minor. So the song went to the F sharp minor. Now, F sharp minor is the relative minor to A major. If you're not sure what a relative minor is, I'll cover that in another lesson. So just leave a comment on the Active Melody page, and I'll be happy to do that. I think I might have touched on it, but maybe I'll devote a whole lesson to it. So every major chord has a relative minor, basically. And so the nice thing about the relationship between a major and a relative minor is, when we're living in the pentatonic scales, So when I'm playing the A major pentatonic scale, I play that same scale, same licks over that chord's relative minor, and it works. But now it's minor. It's minor pentatonic. It's kind of weird. The chord is what's defining it. It's not the single notes, it's the chord. So you can see how that works. So what I'm doing, I'm just going back and forth between a major chord and its relative minor, and I'm just playing that A major pentatonic scale, which transfers to the in this case the F sharp minor pentatonic scale, and it's going back and forth even though I'm playing the same notes. Kind of cool. So the reason that I explained all of that was because even though we've just played these two notes here, or actually we've played one, we've slid from one to the next, a lot goes into that, because where we're at from a pattern perspective is we're pattern 2. Think of pattern 2. We started pattern 2, the major pentatonic scale, for the key of A, because our first chord was an A major scale. So now we're at an F sharp minor chord, but that same pattern 2 works for F sharp minor, but now it's an F sharp, it's the minor pentatonic pattern 2. Hopefully that makes sense, but those same notes, for example, see how they sound kind of bluesy, minor pentatonic, versus if I play the A, happy, sad. Kind of cool, but that's important to know. That'll take you a long way in music, just understanding that relationship between those two, because it happens in like every song. Well, not every song, but lots and lots of songs. You'll hear the major and then the relative minor. And it makes it really easy from a soloing perspective, because you just can keep playing the same stuff. You can stay in the same area. Okay. And that's what we just did. That's the F sharp minor chord. Now, this is interesting. Now, this is where the chord switches to the B7. So now we're going to play. And what I did was I came from here to this note. And by the way, this happened subconsciously when I was coming up with this part. It wasn't like I got real methodical about, okay, now I need to find something in B minor pentatonic or B major pentatonic. I just went, slid the slide, and it naturally locked into that note. So when I analyze that note, that would be the 3 in the B major scale. So there's your B chord, 1, 2, 3, there's that note. That's why it works over the B7 chord, or over a B chord. Even though it's a dominant 7 chord, it's still, the scale would be. So that's the 3. We're sliding now from, and this is happening all in the 2nd string, sliding down to the 4th fret. It has a cool feel to match that up with the chord. Now we're going to go. So really it's all out of the major pentatonic scale for B. And so that's the 4th fret, 5th fret, 7th fret on the 2nd string. And then we slide up here to this note, which is an E note because the chord switches to an E. And you can think of that chord, the way I thought of it was there's an E chord. If we're making our A chord shape and we're making it up here, this is the note out of that. So that's why that works. So backing up, we're playing up to that E. And then I wanted to play, remember the song at this point switches to an E7 chord. So what would be a clever way to do that? How would George do that? Well, I hear him do this a lot where he goes, does like a little 7th chord by playing 2 notes. And what I did was I came from here all the way up to the 12th fret, still on the 2nd string. And again, think about where we're at. I just showed you how we have the little happy place on this side of the A chord shape. Well, here it is up here. So that's why this note, that's a 12th fret second string. That's why that works. Okay, so after we play that, I came back to the 7th fret. I'm sorry, back to the 9th fret. And this time I'm playing strings 2 and 3. So I'm playing both of them. I'm plucking them like this. Why do those two notes work? They're out of that chord shape. So now we can take this, and remember, anytime you're making this chord shape, if you want to get a 7th version of it, go walk it down 2. Just play those two notes though, or those two strings rather, strings 2 and 3. And that's what I did with the slide though. Alright, so we've covered a lot of ground. Let me back up and play up to this point. I'll play it slowly. Okay, and then I just went. So again, I'm just playing in that same little area. It's all in the 2nd string. Try and take advantage of a string as long as you can when you're playing slide. It really makes more sense because instead of going up and down strings this way, go back and forth this way because you've got a lot more that you can do with it, and it has more of a vocal quality when you're sliding into notes. Okay, so from here we're on the 7th fret, 2nd string. I slide up to the 9th fret, and I come back to the 7th fret. It's just one slide though. And then I come down to the 5th fret, 2nd string, and slide up to the 7th. And then slide back to the 5th. So we have. And then the song goes back to the 1 chord, which is actually 7. Came to an E7 down here. Now look at what I did. I was already here on that 5th fret 2nd string, but I know there's an E7 chord, so I wanted to accent that note. Well, it's right there close to where we're at. And I just walk down to it chromatically, which means you have a passing note there. Okay, and then the second time through, I'm going to save that for the next video where we go into a different solo in a different place. But hopefully that gives you a fun little George Harrison style slide in standard tuning that you can play. Now if you've got the jam track, that's really the best way to practice this. So just remember to practice the vibrato technique, which is going back and forth over the fret, above and below the note. And also not bumping frets, not pushing too hard. So in other words, it's a real clean transition up and down the neck, and that's just a light touch. It depends on some of that depends on the type of slide you're using. If you're using a heavier glass slide or even like a brass slide. But just play around with it. You'll get the right touch, and you can make it work. Let me go through this one more time, and then we'll move on to the part 2 video.